Welcome to Case by Case. We want to just take a moment and remind you that this content is intended for adult audiences. It is created for educational and informational purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised, as discussions may include references to real criminal cases, violence, and other sensitive and potentially distressing topics. While we strive to present every case with accuracy and respect those involved, the material may not be suitable for all viewers. Please proceed thoughtfully. And remember, if you need to take a step back, if you find something that concerns you, if you find it to be triggering and you need to take a step back, please do. You can join us whenever you're ready to come back. We'll leave the light on. So, welcome to Case by Case, and we had a verdict this morning. They found Colin Gray guilty on all charges. And I kept thinking as they were reading all of the charges, guilty, guilty, guilty. If they'd have had a few more charges, they might have found him guilty of those too. I'm not really surprised, to be honest with you, that they found him guilty. The closing argument of the defense did bring up, some good points, but the evidence was so overwhelming against him. And it doesn't really matter that you are struggling to raise your 3 kids. It's still your responsibility to keep an eye on what your kids are doing. And if you have been made aware, no matter what, that this is what the precedent is setting right now. If you've been made aware over a period of time that your child is having some issues, if you are aware of violence in those issues, violent tendencies, lashing out at others, writing on Discord, which they really didn't prove that was him, but probably was, writing on social media that you want to do a school shooting, showing an interest. And this, to me, I think was the biggest thing. The shrine on his wall of school shooters. I've said it throughout the recaps, and I'll say it again. There's no way he could have not seen that wall. And we know from the evidence that that wall was up for a long time. And at one point it had other shooters like James Holmes or whatever his name was, the one that shot up the theater, the Dark Knight movie. There were other shooters besides Nicholas Cruz up there. There was that Gendron Payton, I don't know. I'm not familiar with all of the shooters, but my point is he was familiar with them, and he was doing some horrible searches. He was lashing out at family members, and he was lashing out in violent ways. And you don't respond to that behavior by giving your child a gun. You don't respond to violence by giving your child a gun. And then furthermore, he might have still been okay, but you don't then allow that child to have unfettered access of that weapon. And we know that that's exactly what happened. There were plenty of people that testified that on visits, they saw that gun in Colt's room, not in a safe, not with the trigger lock, leaning against the wall in the corner or somewhere in Colt's room. Furthermore, Colin was caught lying on a number of occasions. If you're going to try to cover your ass, You've got to be consistent with it. This is just advice 101. If you are going to try to convince people that something happened that didn't, you better be consistent. And he wasn't. So I'm not truly surprised that he was found guilty. But now the one thing that I was a little shocked about was that they found him guilty on the murder charges. I thought that they might have a little harder time with that, but this is going to be a new precedent. This is going to be something that, we're going to see. And here's what I think is going to happen. I think it's going to be a notice to parents. Do not leave your weapons where your child can get them. Do not give your child weapons when they're having issues. And honestly, I think parents are going to say, you know what? I'm not taking a chance. I'm not getting them a weapon, and they're not going to get my weapons. And I think it's going to have an effect. And I think it's going to, time will tell, but I think that these underage shooters that cannot buy for themselves will either have to find someone to buy for them because they won't be able to get mom and dad's weapons anymore. Now, this came about right after the Crumbleys had been convicted. Mom and dad both got convicted. So one of the things I kind of wonder here is, will there be any charges against the mom? The mom certainly contributed to a lot of the problems. I don't know that we could, justify a charge of murder against her, but certainly there was knowledge that she had that she admitted she didn't even share with Colin. So I don't know if that puts her in the know. And the grandmother, the grandmother knew all of this was going on. He talked to her about school shooters. He lashed out at her. She knew about the issues between him and his mom, and she bought him bullets. So, she had more knowledge than the mom or the dad, because she's the one he talked to and confided in. And she did the same thing. All of them tried to placate him by buying him what he wanted so he wouldn't pitch a temper tantrum. He'll get better if we just buy him these things. And how many times have we seen over and over that parents, that doesn't work. You can't be their friend. You can't be their biggest supporter. You've got to be their parent. And that is tough. It's hard decisions. I know because I went through it. We had to make very, very hard decisions. And it was tough in our house for a couple of years, let me tell you. I'm not going to share a bunch of details, but I can tell you, we didn't have this level that Colt was, okay? I want to say that up front. We didn't have that. But part of the reason I think we didn't have that is we stopped it before it started. We stopped the temper tantrums. We worked with therapists and got advice on the best way to discipline him. We did all of those things. We held his feet to the fire and made him responsible. We didn't allow him to dictate the rules in our home, period. That was one of the things therapists told us up front. He cannot be the rule maker. He is not the parent, and he cannot be the rule maker. It seems to me like Colt was setting the rules. Because if Colt didn't get what Colt wanted, Colt pitched a big old temper tantrum and made everybody walk on eggshells. And that's something that I will say. Parents, do not let your children put you in a position where you are walking on eggshells. Now, I know everybody's situation's different, and a single mom, for example, raising a child where the child may be bigger and can frighten them, you've got to reach outside your home for help in any way that you can. And if that means bringing the police in because you can't afford special help, if you don't have insurance for therapists, call the police. Get them to help you. And call them every single time something happens that is violent in your home towards you or your family members from a family member. Because if you don't, it's going to manifest itself in bigger and larger ways. So I'm not a therapist. I'm just sharing what my knowledge is from a situation where a child was really prone to temper tantrums when he didn't get his way, prone to violent outbursts, and prone to threats against all of us. And we had to stop it. And we did stop it. I'll be interested to see how the legal community is going to react about this, because today it may not have a big effect. You know, people may not talk about it a lot. But I think over the coming days and weeks, people are going to realize how big of an impact this is ultimately going to have. Now, what I do worry about, because we've seen such an uptick of law enforcement and mostly prosecutors, I'm sad to say, taking that information from law enforcement and building a case and filling in the information when they don't necessarily have enough to charge. We're hearing more and more about wrongful convictions all over the nation. And to me, that is just appalling, to think that someone could be spending their life potentially in prison for a crime they didn't commit, didn't have anything to do with. I was just watching something the other day on the Allison Davis case, and they did win her case, but she spent time behind bars, and it was one of those situations where it just wasn't a slam dunk, but they went forward anyway. Now, this is my opinion of these things. I'm telling you what I observe. You may agree, you may disagree, and that's all good. But we're also seeing a number of cases where people are being exonerated by DNA after they've spent 18, 20, 25 years in prison for crimes they didn't have anything to do with. And one of the ones I was just talking with a friend of mine about was the yogurt shop murders. So all of those are cases where people were convicted. You've got West Memphis 3. Now, West Memphis 3, I'm not going to go deep on, because there's so many people that believe one or more of those did commit the crime. And I don't know. I wasn't there. I haven't been privy to all the evidence that everybody's seen. It appeared to me like there was a rush to judgment because they did not like Damien Echols. But then again, we don't know what the media's narrative was. And that's something we've always got to take into consideration when we're looking at these things. On innocence and guilt. What is the narrative? Is it making for a good story? Or is there really a problem? And one of the reasons that we have this channel, YouTube and here on the podcast, is because we like to dig in underneath and see what is really going on. And Amy does that exceptionally well on our YouTube channel. Now, she's been really digging into Delphi. She's coming up on like 40 episodes, going deep into all of these little things. Over here on the podcast side, we don't do that because we limit our time, that we want to keep you listening and, letting it be around an hour. But it's just as important that we look at all the facts that we can get. And if we can't get them, we got to try to get them. So I don't know what's going to happen with this case outcome yet. I mean, obviously they're going to appeal, but unless there were some serious trial errors, I don't know that this is going to, because you can't appeal on the merits. That's not how appeals work. So I don't know. I didn't see anything egregious. I didn't see any major arguments over issues. This judge was really in tune with both attorneys. There were a couple of disagreements, I think, over the charges. Jimmy Berry may send it to an appellate attorney for that issue, or he may file the initial. I don't know how it'll happen, but one thing I can tell you is we need to keep an eye on whether or not this has an effect on shooters themselves, because they cannot get access to the guns from their parents, underage shooters. Because it seems like after Ethan Crumley's, we did see a change for a while. Now, again, I don't keep up with every single shooting case, but if it makes the news, I catch it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Thank you for listening to this case recap in this series with Case by Case, and I look forward to bringing you some more content in the next few days.